I just want to call your quick attention towards an attitude towards music that has kind of changed my world on music as a whole in particular. And it's something I learned very recently and something that I hopefully could help a lot of people upon sharing my insight about it. So I have just had I've had these revelations on learning how to compose great music, but it was from learning from how to listen to music rather than how to make music. And I've learned something to me at least, quite astonishing of how listening to music can sort of dictate how great the music you make becomes. So to start off simply, I think all of us are familiar with music that that doesn't sound great. That doesn't sound great when we listen to it passively, but then when we listen to it very intently, and we try to turn off all the background noise, and we really listen to the lyrics for what they are, and we really try to appreciate the artist behind them, the history behind them, the emotion behind it, the story behind it. We start to appreciate the music more and more as we go on, and there's many examples of this. There's a Daniel Johnston for one, Jandek, sorry. A lot of the classical people, John Cage, most of the great experimental composers, where their music doesn't sound too good, but thanks to the idea and the history behind it, we now have a newfound appreciation for it. Now, something that's kind of changed my world, which is the door to my realization of how important it is to compose great music even when it's silent, is that it can also be the other way around. And that I have not really given much thought about at all. But it never even occurred to me that it could be possible, but because listening to music is actually not as simple as, now I know is not as simple as I thought it was. There is a lot of music, probably more so than the other way around. There's more abundantly, there is music that sounds great when we listen to it passively, when we're not paying a lot of attention to it. And then when we decide to turn the record on or our streaming service and we listen to it in a quiet room and we absorb the music, it actually loses its profundity. It loses its power over us. The music actually becomes worse the more attentively we listen to it. And that's because it has elements that make a simple song great, but it doesn't really have any elements that make it groundbreaking or revolutionary. It could be that all the instruments are perfectly in tune. It could be that they're playing a very cohesive chord progression. It could be that they're playing phonoaesthetically pleasing words. But when you get to the concept of it, and when you get to the story and the history and the context, and you really start to take it more seriously, the less seriously you take the music upon listening to it seriously. And that's kind of something that kind of shook me, honestly. It was pretty stunning. I never knew how much of an art it could be to actually listen to music, listening to music as an art. But that's something that I learned from Anthony Fantanto's video on how he listens to music. And that a lot of the records, when he listens to it in a very absorbful, very attentive way, a lot of the music that he listened to passively actually didn't become too interesting after that. And I couldn't help but make this a very direct connection to Morton Feldman on his pretty legendary book, Give My Regards to 8th Street, where he talks about how quiet music is really the future of music, not loud music. Not loud and direct music, but the opposite, the quiet, developmental music. And I kind of agree. I think I can worded a little better too, which is that loud music commands your attention, whereas quiet music demands your attention. Quiet music, you don't have a choice but to take it seriously for a moment and to try and absorb it. And that's really the missing link, is if a song sounds good passively but loses its magic when you take it seriously, it usually means that there's not that much great theory behind it. And that could mean poetically in the lyrics, and it could also mean there's not much groundbreaking music theory going on. And I connect that a lot to Vladimir Nabokov's lectures, where Vladimir Nabokov says that a lot of the greatest books are not books that are worth reading. They are books that are worth rereading over and over again for us to discover new things about them decades after they came out. And that's what I think our goal should be as songwriters. We should not write music that is worth listening to. We should write music that is worth studying, music that is worth taking labor and work to understand. And my favorite example would have to be Chaconne by Bach. It's the violin piece that finally made me appreciate Bach after about 10 years of not really understanding why he's so great. And that piece finally did it for me. It made me realize how mathematically perfect his chord progressions and intervals and ratios were. So that's just something, it's just this kind of a sequence of ideas that I thought organically came together that I wanted to share with the world. That the goal of songwriting is not to write songs worth listening to, write songs that are worth re-listening to over and over again. And I think the best method to do this is to, in the first stage of writing a song, write it as quietly as possible or perform it as quietly as possible so that we can really get to the bare bones of the theory, both in the lyrics, if there are lyrics, and in the music theory behind it. And then from there, we can try to make it exciting. But I feel if the theory is not exciting already, then I think musicians are going to have a very tough time making a composition that is going to last and that's going to age well.